Beer is one of the oldest beverages that humans have ever produced. The ancient Babylonian Empire was well known for brewing ales, and for the Egyptians, beer was part of their daily diet. There are two main categories of beer, which are ales and lagers, and the key difference between these two are the temperature at which they are brewed. Ales are what ancient civilizations brewed, and lagers weren't developed until the early 1800s. I conducted a survey at CWI of 20 people, 14 of which said that they enjoy drinking some variety of beer weekly. I also calculated that if you brew a 5-gallon batch, the ingredients should roughly cost about $25, which will produce about 9 6-packs. So if you brew your own beer, you'll be paying about 50% less than what you normally pay for a store-bought 6-pack. So it really does save you money to brew your own beer. According to brewersassociation.org, Idaho ranks the 23rd in the U.S. for breweries per capita, and Idaho produces roughly 60,000 barrels of craft beer every year. Today I'm going to teach you how to brew a 5-gallon batch of the freshest beer you'll ever taste. Now, some of you may not know very much about the process of brewing beer, and this speech will hopefully give you more information about it. And some of you may know a lot about brewing beer, but since there are endless variations and techniques that go into it, maybe you'll learn something new. I'm currently in the last steps of brewing my first 5-gallon batch, and I have taken tours of craft breweries, and I have seen how the process unfolds. There are three main steps in brewing beer. Number 1 is making the wort, number 2 is fermenting, and number 3 is bottling. Now when you're making the wort, you need malt. To make the malt, you can make the malt yourself by steeping grains in water, but the easiest way to do this is by going down to your local brew store and buying 6 pounds of malt extract. Now, the most important thing to remember when you're brewing is you want to sanitize everything that you're going to use, because if bacteria gets into your batch, it could ruin it completely. The first step is to heat 3 gallons of water in a kettle pot. Pour the malt extract in and stir it until it dissolves. Once the mixture reaches a rolling boil, add 1 1/4 ounce hops to give the beer its bite. After you've done this, leave the wort on the burner for 16 minutes on medium heat while stirring regularly. After the 60 minutes is up, turn the burner off and add another 1/4 ounce of hops to give it a nice aroma. Next, you want to rapidly cool down the wort to 70 degrees Fahrenheit in a bathtub or large sink that's full of ice. Next, add 2 gallons of cold water to the carboy, and then pour 3 gallons of water into the wort. Then dissolve a packet of dry yeast in 105 degree water and let it sit for 10 minutes. Then pour it into the carboy. This is called pitching the yeast. Make sure you shake the carboy well to mix the yeast in. Alright, now that we've made the wort and pitched the yeast, the next step is fermentation. Now for the fermentation process, you want to seal the carboy with an airlock that will let CO2 gas escape but not let the oxygen into the wort. Then store the batch in an undisturbed area at room temperature for about 3 weeks. According to homebrewtalk.com, there are 3 phases that the beer goes through during the fermentation process. Number 1 is the lag phase, number 2 is the growth phase, number 3 is the fermentation phase. The lag phase starts the moment you pitch the yeast. The yeast uses the malt sugars and oxygen to build up their energy reserves, and they won't start converting anything to alcohol until they've been well fed. The next phase is the growth phase. When the yeast cells have enough energy, they are ready to start multiplying and creating new cells. And this is when a thick layer of foam is created at the surface of the beer. The next is the fermentation phase. This is when the yeast begins turning the malt sugars into CO2 and alcohol. The yeast is so active that the temperature of the beer can rise 3 to 5 degrees. And eventually the yeast will die and create a layer of sediment at the bottom of the carboy. Now that the beer has gone through all 3 phases, it's time to bottle it. First, you need to prime the beer. Dissolve corn sugar in boiling water and add it to the bottom of a bottling bucket. Next, siphon the beer out of the carboy into the bottling bucket and stir the mixture. Then use tubing and run it from your bottling bucket to fill up the bottles. Put the bottles with a cap crimper and store the bottles at room temperature for about a week to let them carbonate. After all these steps are completed, you now have 5 gallons of the freshest beer that you will ever taste. In summary, I hope this gave everyone a better idea of the complexity and the patience that goes into making every bottle and every glass of beer. Beer has a rich history dating back thousands of years to the Mesopotamian region, and the ingredients and flavors have been evolving ever since. To quote the musician Kinky Friedman, beauty is in the eye of the beer holder. Thank you.